We are live. Welcome, everyone, to The Reason We Learn Friday afternoon, somewhat happy hour, not so happy hour. What should we call it? Welcome to this show. This should be required viewing and listening, in my opinion, for anyone out there who says, I'm going to run for school committee or school board. We're going to turn the school board. You know what we need to do? We just need to get new school board or school committee members. And I've been hearing that a lot. So I said to my friend, Justice Graves, who is a school committee member, what would you like to say to those folks? Now I will stop speaking.
Oh, goodness.
First, introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are.
Yes. So I'm Justice Graves. I am a school committee member for the Narragansett Regional School District in Templeton and Phillipston, Massachusetts. Yes, if you think I'm young, yes, I'm 22 years old. And how would I respond to those people? School committee is not what you think it is, and it's not something to glorify, and it is not exciting. In very small moments, it can be exciting, but not over the long haul. No.
But aren't you so powerful? I mean, we get the impression that there's so much power in the school board. I mean, we see parents screaming, and don't get me wrong, folks watching right now, I applaud the parents getting involved and voicing their opinions, and many of them so eloquently, and I'm watching from home, clapping. Doesn't matter what state you're in. I think great. I'm loving what I'm hearing. I just am not convinced that it's as momentous or powerful or effective a means of achieving reform as people might think that it is. What do you think? Or what do you know?
I
Because
mean,
you're in it.
what do I know? Well, and I knew this way before I did this when I ran, but people think, oh, we're going to go into the school boards and we're just going to walk right on in and we're going to change everything. I can't get into the building without being buzzed in. Like, you don't get a key card to just walk into the school buildings at any point that you want. So that's one thing that you should all
Yeah.
know. That's basically universal. You don't get to go and watch anything that the teachers are doing unless you have a scheduled visit, which requires permission. So how are you just going to become a school committee member or board member and just walk in any place that you want and just I knew this even before I ran. I knew this back when I was like, what, 15, 16? It's not how it works, folks. I understand that, we look all interesting, we look all powerful because we sit in these seats and we cast these votes. But at the end of the day, it's just a vote. I can't physically do anything.
Well, okay. So when you say it's just a vote, I think a lot of people are saying, well, we'll turn the school board and that will change the curriculum, or that will ban bad things from the curriculum, or that will implement good things to the curriculum. Do school committee members really have much say, or does it vary state by state or district by district? How does it work in terms of your actual say in the curriculum?
Um, well, first of all, the curriculum vote was way earlier before I even got elected, but that we don't even see what textbooks they use. It's just we do accreditation. We do we set how many credits per class and what the class descriptions are, and sometimes we get a little presentation. But if it's something new, I've seen that on the previous school committee meetings. But otherwise, unless I have a set of curricula in front of me that they're putting in front of me, or like a list of it, it's not. I can't just go in there and say, hey, you're not teaching out of this specific piece of literature. Let's say I want them to read out of J.R. Tolkien instead of, I don't know, Hemingway. I can't just walk in and do that. I wouldn't even know unless I knew the teacher what books they were using or not using, or if they, I don't know, went into surplus or something. Like, it's not common for us to even interact at that level.
So you have it you have a say, or you see things at a higher level, like kids will learn these
It's basically
concepts, or kids will.
it's basically the 1,000-foot it's basically the 1,000-foot view most of the time. And if you're in a board of education, which usually is at the state level, like in my state, in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, I believe Vermont does this as well. It's all done by school committees at the local level, not county level. I know there are a lot of county boards in the South, but up north in New England, it's by committees. And then anything major basically goes to the Board of Education. And if school committees aren't doing well, the Board of Education can take over. Right. The State Board of Education can. So
when parents are watching these scenes like I'm watching, are those parents going in and making those speeches and getting angry? I mean, it sounds like people in your position are just hated right now, regardless of what your position is. There's someone who hates you.
Well,
no matter what it is.
I mean, if anybody who remembers me back when we did that talk with Dr. B and we were on her channel, I ran on an anti-CRT Karen Borisenko. I call her Dr. B because I mess up her name, and that's now canon official.
That's fine. But I will just translate.
It's fine.
Carlin Borisenko. Okay. Yeah. So back when you did that, so you ran on an anti-CRT platform.
Yeah.
Okay.
I ran and people didn't like me, and we went through. I'm sure there were some gripes that even my fellow, committee members that got elected in with me had. Although we don't. One of the other things is that you can't talk to. Most people don't know this, but even if you're on a state board of education, you can't talk to your other committee members. We're supposed to basically not communicate with each other until the meeting. We get all the meeting materials, and then that's when we do stuff. It's against the law if we talk in too much of a group. So we don't usually give an opinion on a specific district item. We usually, most people don't. If they are a teacher, they try not to work in the district, or if they do, they try to really, you can be a school committee member and work in your district, and there's exceptions for that. But it makes it difficult, when you're dealing with certain things such as, unions, if you're in a union or not, that can come up. It's not what people think it is. I can't, if a person walks up to me on the street, I can certainly tell them what my opinions are. But until I actually get a meeting agenda and until I actually am in the room and the gavel goes down, it's silence. I don't. And my last committee meeting was a great example of, I didn't know what I was going to walk into. I didn't know how people were going to feel or vote. It was very surreal at a very high level. And for those people who don't know, my school district just voted on whether or not we were going to do a mask mandate or not. That's what we did on Wednesday night. That's what I got to go through on Wednesday night. And your people on both sides of that issue are very passionate, right? You've got some people. That's exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go. I mean, I can go into detail on that because it was a public meeting. If it's a public thing that already happened, then I can talk about it in detail. When we got to the meeting, I truly didn't know how this was going to go down. And then we cast our first vote. It happened to be that there were only 6 of us there, and we tied. And we all took a step back and we all looked at each other. Some of us had cast some opinions before and we were trying to feel each other out. Some of us outright said what we were going to do or not do. But then, when we got to the actual, the yays and the nays, we were like, whoa. And we had to take a step back and say, okay, how did we get to this point? And how are, what are we going to do? And because that's when we all finally knew what we each felt about it in that one moment.
So it's not even like Congress online, where you can go build coalitions and try to persuade other people and all that.
Because that's most of the time your state, boards of education and even your local educational committees, they have to abide by usually what we're considered is, nonpartisan officials, which means that we don't have party affiliations on the ballot. We don't have in my case, usually what usually tries to happen is that they try and put town against town because it's the two-town system. So they try and put, P's for Phillipston versus T's for Templeton. And
Gotcha.
thank goodness we don't do that on my committee. Thank goodness. I'm actually pretty happy we don't, because that would get really bad. And we don't. And I was grateful after the meeting last night because we didn't really push at each other on even, Democrat versus Republican, and most of us, we're not registered in a party anyway. So it was just a situation where, we're sitting there and we're like, now how do we move forward? We can't coalition build beforehand. We don't even know most of the time who's going to be at the meeting beforehand. We usually hope that enough people show up for a quorum. We set up the agenda. It's, even though you could tell people, yes, I am going, and you could make sure that a group shows up, but that's basically the extent in basically all 50 states that you're allowed to do, is set a schedule and say, please show up, and basically text everybody and be like, are you showing up? Are you showing up? Are you showing up? It's a guessing game. So it's
Now,
not what people think it is.
One question I know a lot of people have is about like sunshine laws. And it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that every state has them. They may vary a little bit from state to state as to what they are, how they're written, and so forth. But based on my own research, I got through like 26 states or something. And what I found is a lot of parity. Like, it was really similar to the point where there were almost no differences. And that what I saw consistently was sort of this public right to know, right to hear, right to read, right to, all these kinds of things that, as far as not only record keeping, but when you could have a closed door session, like those executive kind of things that had to, well, in many states, I don't know if it's all, but many states has to be over something legal. Like there's a reason regarding like a pending legal case that you don't have the public involved or something of that nature. Sometimes hiring and firing decisions when there's privacy issues.
Security is a big one too. No, we're talking like sting operations. That's very common if you're going into like a board of selectmen's meeting, if they're going to talk with their chief of police, and it's about like an operation that they're going to do in town with the local FBI. It's possible that they have executive session for it. In Massachusetts, it's reason number 10. It's, security, sting operations, etc. So and in Massachusetts, we only have 10 reasons how we can do it. One of them, of course, is personnel. One of it has to do with, negotiations, although that doesn't always have to have it. There's some other ways to
but
deal
there's
with
nothing,
that.
But I didn't see, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, and this might be specific to your district, but maybe just in general. I didn't find anything that said, that you can't, like, you can do closed door kind of votes when the public is angry or when people are saying things we don't want to hear or things like that. So when you've seen other states do things like lock out the public or eliminate public comment or things like that, I know that in some cases it's legal, like to stop public comment if it's getting them off track of what their agenda is and stuff. But I've seen them take it really far in some places.
Right.
And how does that work?
How does that work?
Like, I mean,
so your sunshine laws usually include provisions that it has to be available to the public, even if there's no public comment period. They encourage public comment period. It's usually in all of the sunshine laws. It's just usually in a deeper section.
But it's not required, and it's not like a right that you have public comment, or is it?
Right. It's not a right. It has to be a policy set by the authority, and sometimes they don't even follow, as we see. Sometimes we don't follow our public input policy to the letter. Sometimes we're more lenient than others. We went very lenient on people on Wednesday. I can tell you, if you look at the video, we have a 15-minute limit, but we let people speak, as many as actually we could for an hour. And some people actually didn't speak about the mask mandate issue that we were going to discuss. Some people talked about other things that were coming before the board, which was important because this was the meeting right before school started. So that's also why I was very grateful, because that, our chair had allowed it, and that we had gone through, because we needed to hear everybody, and we needed to know what votes we were either making, what votes were either going to be majorly important, or what we thought was major but wasn't really major, or any new information that we didn't know that the public probably had, because that's the only way that we really get that but yeah, if the every board and committee has to execute the business on its agenda as much as it can. So you can't grandstand, and no offense to people, you do have First Amendment rights, but you can't grandstand in, I don't want to take ownership for it, but in like one of my meetings for over 5 hours and say you can't vote on anything. You can't filibuster on the floor of a school board. You can't filibuster on the board of a school committee. In fact, there's rules that we can, there's actually a proper way to do it to stop that. But as we have clearly seen with school districts such as, Loudoun and South Kingston, I believe that's one of the
Rhode
big
Island,
ones too,
and then I think you mean Loudoun County in Virginia. I think it's Loudoun. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's Loudoun. Okay, Loudoun County, Virginia. Yeah. I think even the Atlanta County school board, or not the Atlanta County, but in Atlanta, that school board also had an issue too a few weeks ago.
There's a few famous ones, and there's some in Arizona that have been shut down. There's some in Pennsylvania, Ohio.
Yeah,
I've seen quite a few where they've either been shut down, cut short. I wouldn't say cut short. I mean, shorter than people wanted them to be. People wanted to say, and so I'm just going to pull this up because you need to hear this. Look, Glenn Gabbs. Yes, we're all proud of Justice. He's walked into the fire. He's gone towards the fire and trying to make things better from the inside. And it's been, has it been a little bit of a kind of rude awakening, kind of? Or did you know? You knew going in, right? That it was going to be like this.
I've kind of been through this before. I was in student government back when I was at UMass Lowell, and I quit student government over some of the reasons I knew going into this, that you couldn't really do anything, and I'll say this, thank God that we have sunshine laws, and thank God that we have these things, because if we didn't, back in student government, you don't have those things. So we would make backroom deals, we would coalition build, and we wouldn't know the money that we were spending. And fun fact, that's where a lot of, our young kids in college are learning how to do it at, a committee level to, go back and forth, not tell people what the budget numbers are. And then they get a rude awakening when they go into public life. And it's like, no, you can't do that.
So much for the schools encouraging honor and trustworthiness, right?
Well, at the higher education level, I can tell you that's the reason why I quit student government as a senator, because I kept asking my finance committee chair, we're approving your meeting minutes, and that basically means we've approved the budget that we're all paying for with our tuition. That's tuition money that we're spending for things. And he wouldn't tell us anything. And but that's not parents? True with wow. Yeah, as a former senator at large, I will tell you there are reasons that I quit. One semester, I made it one semester, and I couldn't do it. I had watched the meetings for years. My friends said that we needed help. I'm like, okay. I ran in one of the open seats. There were many open seats, and then.
So if student government's corrupt, if the student government is corrupt at the college level, where are these people then going? And this is. Thank you for sharing.
I know where they're going, because I've seen some of them. Some of them are out like politicking right now. Some of them want to be on city council. Some of them, and I know them in my state. And I had basically told one of my friends, please keep tabs on these people, because I'm concerned, because I know how they are. I know what they think is okay, and I know that they don't. That they're just used to this way of thinking. It's like you don't play Republican or Democrat in a local setting like this. It doesn't work well, and you end up just upsetting people more and more and more.
It's not the place to play for your team. You're there to do a job and to represent. You're there to do it. First of all politicians are supposed to represent all their constituents, regardless of their party affiliation. That's something people forget. But when you're down at this local level, especially, I hope people listening are starting to realize across the last few years how all politics is local, like how vitally important it
Yeah.
is to know who your sheriff is, for example, because who's going to come to your
Yeah.
door and bang at that door or bang in the door of your business and go, we're here to enforce the whatever mandate. Okay. It's going to be that guy or girl or whatever woman. Sorry. Or am I allowed to say that? I don't even know what I'm allowed to say anymore. That person. I would say guy, even if it was a woman, but whatever. See how we trip on ourselves? But I'm so grateful for you talking to us today, because even I, like I said, I do all this research into states and how things work. And I've come to the conclusion that for myself, my opinion, that, I know everyone doesn't share it, that reform is not possible. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that people truly believe who are pushing for the reform angle, that's their path, is that they're going to start at that school board level, that they're, the school committee level. And I've been trying to say, be careful, and not be careful like bad things are going to happen to you, but just be
Right.
careful that you're putting your eggs in this one basket, or that you're expecting more from this process or these people than they can even deliver. I think people believe if they go and give impassioned speeches that the school board will realize that, oh my goodness, we need to vote differently, or what? Like, or we're going to lose our next election. You're serving for 3 years, right?
Yeah, my term is 3 years. Most other, I mean, at the town level, we're talking 3-year terms usually, and if
And
we're
they're
talking at the city
staggered,
level,
aren't
they're
they?
2-year terms. Yes, everyone's staggered. Yes,
So
everyone.
it's, I mean,
It's only you can't. And I told people this back when I ran on that campaign, and because there were 3 committee seats open, I took one of them. Another person took another one in the other town, and then there was still a third one in my town. And I said, listen, anyone's gonna fill it if they run as a write-in, because nobody really wants to do these kinds of jobs, because as also mandated, most school committees are not paid positions. Now, I want to point something out here. That doesn't mean that we can't campaign and accept campaign contributions. Now, at my level, and I can say this for a fact, I actually signed a form with my town clerk that said I will not use or accept any funds and use it for campaign purposes.
okay.
Our district, our area, Templeton and Phillipston, is typically considered, it's not a worthwhile target for certain special interest groups like the Democratic Party. But if you go 30 miles south to Holden, that school committee election for one of the largest regionals in the state, most of the I think all of the ones that won those seats, all got money from the local Democrat or Republican parties, that they were able to support that campaign and push them through to the finish line.
Right.
And most
And I'm
people
sure that's the
don't.
case. The larger the district, the bigger
The more,
this, yeah.
well, the wider the reach of the district. Some districts that you can see where this happens aren't necessarily the largest, or but they're the more influential, where people come up, or where people create policies that really matter. And it really depends on region by region, or the history of just the town or city that you're in. But there's some pretty, it's not what people think it is. At the local level, like mine, none of us took campaign funds. None of us go out and, run on a particular party platform. But in the cities, they do, you can get campaign funds from anybody. And it, it, it's,
Right. I mean, I've heard that.
yeah.
I had somebody on from Oregon, from Beaverton. I think she ran in Beaverton, and she was up against union money
Oh, I heard
because
about that one. Yeah.
in that particular district, the union had their candidate, and apparently the incumbent was so accustomed to winning, and she'd really run unopposed, whatever. And so here's somebody coming in and challenging,
Mhm.
and things stayed pretty quiet for a while until the challenger started gaining support. Like you, she was running on an anti, not just CRT, but sort of an anti, what do they call it? Comprehensive sex ed curriculum. platform, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
there's some other, yeah.
a bunch of money came in, and not just money, but also physical effort, like people showing up and removing her signs
Yeah.
and all kinds of things. So, you know, what I think I'm trying to get across to people is obviously every state is different. Every district is going to have some differences. So you have things that are different from place to place in terms of how it works, how you get elected and so forth. But once you're serving, then the differences get smaller or more, like, in other words, the power that school board and school committee members have to influence curriculum directly happen less frequently than you think. In other words, like you said, 1,000-foot level. It's not like this week we're gonna, or this month we're gonna have a meeting and change curriculum.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work like that. And at the same time, they have you guys don't have punitive power. Like, if people came to you and said, like, punish these teachers or make them stop doing
no.
X, like, you don't have that power at all, right?
No.
Exactly.
No, we can't interact with personnel like that. That's not what we do.
Right.
I said, we can't walk. We wouldn't have the ability to be a quasi judicial committee anyway, because we would need to be able to. I mean, we can do it. I mean, committees can investigate, but like, we don't have the ability to just walk in and do whatever we want in the school buildings. Again, I have to get buzzed in, and I have to. I don't have an ID card. If I go over to my board of selectmen, they all have ID cards. They have keys. They can walk in, open the door, go into town hall. If you're city council, you can do the same thing. You can walk into city hall. If you're the mayor, you can walk into city hall.
Right.
This is totally different.
It's like you're a public servant, but you're still a private citizen in the sense that they're treating, like, you're not an employee of that system. So you haven't been cleared or background checked, right? Y'all aren't background checked, aren't you?
We don't have any medical records or, background checks in the district. I mean, I'm glad that I go and I get stuff done for myself and that I have been background checked before, but
I wasn't saying that to cast aspersions on you, of course. I just want people to understand.
No, that's fine. I mean, I just, that was something that I didn't realize until I got elected. I'm like, this has not come up. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute. Anyone can get elected. Mm-hmm. What is this?
Right. So, I mean, again, for the audience, and now, we're almost half an hour into this, so they're, a pretty consistent group of people that have stuck with us. Can you just list off for us, high level, the powers you do have as a school committee member? What kinds of things you vote on, and what does the school committee have power over? Just for like basic 101, school board, school committee 101. Any the things that are applicable pretty much across the board, regardless of what state you're in, would you say?
Superintendents. It's always superintendents. It's as we say, hire, fire,
like hire, fire. Okay.
Hire, fire, negotiate with. Buildings and grounds, what can be permitted, but you and I'm trying to think of what else. Random things that the state doesn't want to take any responsibility for, like, a mask mandate. So it gets thrown at you. Like, here's, our recommendations. We definitely want you to do this. But, figure this out.
So they can't make you, or can they? I guess some states are making them do it, right? Or no? Does the governor of a state have the authority to tell a local school district, you have to mask up all the children?
Okay, so this might be a really good point for me to talk about what happened at my school committee meeting on Wednesday. So in my school district, I told you we had a tie vote. And then eventually we went through and we had another vote we had a few votes that were cast. And the final vote was that we weren't going to have any policy. It was going to be optional. That's what happened. It was a 4-2 vote. And then, we had discussed at great length during that meeting that because I'm in Massachusetts, as my chairwoman had said during the meeting, we legislate everything in Massachusetts and then we litigate everything in Massachusetts. This is how Massachusetts works. And so we were, some of us were unsure of what that meant. And me particular, I had mentioned that a few times in the open meeting on Wednesday. And then I'm going about, my day yesterday, nothing's going on. And then I check my email and also the news this morning, and our commissioner is seeking, under the powers of, an emergency situation, to convene the Board of Education to mandate masking until October 1st.
Okay.
Now, whether you like that isn't the problem. The interesting part is that at the state level, it depending on your state and depending on how your state is set up, they all usually have boards of education. So basically, it is at the Board of Education level, and that's considered state. That is established by the Constitution of Massachusetts, and they have the final say on this, because the federal government doesn't have the power to mandate masking. But they do have the power, and we talked about this on Wednesday, to mandate masking on all intra and interstate travel within any public transportation. Because school buses, no matter what, on Wednesday, we had to understand, because of the CDC's order from back in January with the continued public health emergency, we could not stop. We had to mask the kids up on the buses when they were going to school. Basically, that's what happened.
Because even within the state, the federal government has that authority?
Yes, under the Public Health Services Act, as I said on Wednesday.
Wow.
So.
All right. So that's good for parents to understand. It's kind of like where the authority, starts and ends and so forth. Because, when you hear the president say, I'm going to override these bans on mask mandates at the state level, there's a limit to what he can do with that. Like, he certainly can't do it outside of these kinds of issues, right?
Yeah, I mean, he isn't. I mean, just like how a school committee is not quasi-judicial, the president is not quasi-judicial. I mean, if he's the chief of staff, not the chief of staff, the chief of the commander-in-chief. Dear goodness, as the commander-in-chief, he does have certain, judicial abilities within the military branch, technically speaking. But if we're talking about, over all 50 states, this is a union of states. It's not, this isn't Canada. It's
Right.
not like you have your local and then your county. I don't even have a county form of government, Deb. I don't even have a county board of education that tells me anything. Some places do, even up in New England. I don't even have a
Right.
county form of commissioners for anything. It's just
local. Right. Whereas here in Charlotte,
yeah.
we do. We have
Yeah.
county level. So, okay. So I think this is important. So you have, mask mandates and buildings and grounds. I assume budget, though. I assume there's some spending that y'all have some say
But
over.
No. So we're the way that it sort of is with the way that towns are. It's the school committee sets the budget at sort of an executive level. There are some, sort of legislative power of the purse abilities, that you'll see sort of depending on the state. But we basically set the budget, we request it from the member towns, and the legislative session is basically people debate it on the floor, and it either passes or it doesn't pass, and people can make motions for literally $2. It can be like that. So we have to
you can just get tied up in all kinds of minutia. Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends on the year, and it depends on what people want to get upset about. I mean, my district has had a history back in 2019 of, and I, thank goodness, was over at college, and so I missed the whole thing. But we, in 2019, had a huge budget battle with one of our member towns, the member town that I'm in, which is Templeton, and it took technically 5 meetings of not forced, but basically maneuvered meetings. And the town voted the budget down 5 times. They voted the budget down. Well, technically they voted the budget once. It went to a special type of vote called a override, which
Mm-hmm.
is a ballot initiative because Massachusetts has rules about taxes. So depending on what triggers that, that's what goes on the ballot. As if you say yes to it at town meeting,
Right.
it goes on the ballot, and then it's a secret ballot, and then you cast your secret ballot, and then that ballot failed, and then we had to keep going through the process
Mm-hmm.
until either the school committee stopped trying to set a budget higher than what the town had said,
Mm-hmm.
or until the town agreed to the budget that the school committee said. This is actually very common on city councils. They'll go back and forth with their school committee because at the city level, all executive and well, not all executive, but there's like an executive amount of power that they have, and the power of the purse is what the city council almost exclusively has, and they can just keep pushing it back down to the committee
Does the
level.
does the public have any say in your meeting agendas? So, in other words, if a sufficient number of people in the public say we want to have a meeting of the school board to discuss whatever, like I said, the curriculum or what that y'all are buying
No,
books for the students that we don't like or
no,
something. No.
no.
So they can't just
We have to call. It has to
yep.
be the members. Like if we wanted to have a meeting, then the school, like if the school committee members are like, okay, we want to have a meeting, and we all started emailing the superintendent, yeah, we would schedule a meeting, but it has to be us. We have to set
Okay.
the schedule.
So then when we're seeing people step up and talking about these issues during public comment, is it fairly safe to assume in most cases that wasn't the agenda for that night, that people are just kind of coming
Yeah,
to public comment
yeah.
and wanting to yell at the school board? And again, please don't hear me
Um,
as criticizing you parents. That's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to provide
no,
education
I
here.
mean, the public has a right to always show up to any public meeting that they want and talk on any item that they want that is
Okay.
within the power of that body. But that doesn't mean that it's on our agenda. We usually like it when it's on our agenda. That happened to
Okay.
be what most people talked about on Wednesday. But no, that's not what happens.
Okay. So people are coming with their agenda, and if there's
Mhm.
public comment, then they get it. So again, my goal here, if you're just tuning in, is to educate the audience, educate parents, educate concerned citizens. I know a lot of people are showing up to school committee and school board meetings who are simply concerned taxpayers. And I think I'm getting the impression there's sort of a misapprehension about, as I said, the powers that you have, that what is in your purview, and even what their quote unquote rights are as far as speaking about topics, speaking for lengths of time, how many people get to speak. And I think it's again, it makes great sort of theater in a way, and it's good that people are getting emboldened to speak up for their schools. But I want to make sure people understand who does work for them and who doesn't work for them, if that makes sense. In that respect, like if your gripe is about curriculum, who would you suggest that parents go to instead? What is a better way than appealing to school board members?
On like specific items,
Well,
like
like, yeah,
I
like let's say
don't.
somebody's really upset with using 1619 project, for example, as US history, or they're very upset with the comprehensive sex ed that's going on in their kids' classes or whatever. I mean, they can come to the school board and say what they want to say. Certainly that's allowed, right? But what realistically could you do about it?
Um, Nothing.
Okay. Okay. So that that
Is that what you wanted to hear?
it
Because
it's
that's exactly what the answer is, everybody. Because I can't see the comments. I haven't even been watching them, but
no, there's I
that's
no one is asking this. I'm hypothesizing questions because, or I'm putting out the questions I think people should be asking, because I see it happening a lot, and there's part of me, like I said, my heart goes out because I have a lot of the same questions. I have the same feelings. I'm cheering for people. I'm like, you go, go say what you want to say, and I'm so happy to see so many clear thinking people and so many articulate people voicing opinions that I share. Who wouldn't be, right? But there's a piece of me that's pained. There's a piece of me just saying, oh, honey, it doesn't work like that. And I don't mean to sound condescending either. I just want people to understand reality, because, they're getting, even from some very high profile voices in various political sectors are saying things like, you own the schools, you got to show up to the school board meetings and tell them what's what, they're your employees, and they have to do what you want. And I'm listening to this, I'm like, you're giving like the worst advice I've ever heard. This is not accurate. You're just simply factually inaccurate. You're giving people bad advice. And if they do this, they're going to get either very frustrated, or things could boil over. And what there are two things I want. One, good people such as yourself not to get hate mail. Okay. You're just trying to do a job. And then the second thing is, even people I disagree with, I don't think hate mail and threats is the way to go. Okay. Oh, yeah. Second thing, I want people who still want reform, or they want to voice I want them to be as effective with their energy as possible. I believe in effectiveness. I'm not a fan of waste. Okay. So
no kidding.
Right. So
it's just right. So the only place that really, really changes anything locally, if we're really getting into, my perspective, is in my town, it's the boards of selectmen. I mean, it's your city councilors, it's your mayor. I mean, that's way more significant than, and I'm not saying that it's not important who is on the school committee. Don't get me wrong. If you have the wrong people, it can get, depending on if they don't even know what the rules are, it could potentially become a very not healthy situation. And again, that's when the Board of Education steps in.
But isn't it more the board's responsibility, like the State Board of Education or Department of Public Instruction, or whatever you want to call it? Aren't they the people who ultimately decide the standards for the state, the curriculum standards and so forth? And then it's my impression that on a site by site basis, so principal by principal, is where they make these micro curriculum decisions, where they decide as a team of teachers, for example, we're going to teach these books. Am I incorrect or correct?
No, and no, you're not incorrect. I mean, it can even go down to, department heads. If you have a math department head, if you have a science department head, sometimes they can be more interesting. Or if you just have a, group of kindergarten teachers, like they'll basically just be their own team, and that's what they decide. And as long as, the building principal is okay with it, then that's what happens.
Right. I mean,
and as long as it conforms to basic regulation. I mean,
right. And that is what I'm trying to get through to people, as they're going school board, as if school boards have ability to, they're judicial. They're not. You don't have the power to grab a teacher out of a classroom and put them on trial and judge them for whatever they've done in the classroom. You don't have the power to say, you can't use this book, you can't use that curriculum, stop doing this, stop doing that. It's just, now there may be school boards or school committees that have more or less power over the spending for stuff like that. Like if it comes to their attention that a school is spending a bunch of money on something that, either doesn't adhere to the standards. Like if a group of schools or a superintendent is allowing the principals to do things that don't fall on, that the Board of Education, like you guys maybe could escalate that, right? But you can't.
Yeah. No. Like back in 2019, initially it was the budget was voted down by the town 5 times. It went back to the school committee. The school committee had a choice by a certain deadline. Would they accept the amount raised and appropriated by the town of Templeton, or would they not? And initially they actually didn't. In that case, they actually had to have a meeting the next week, because that week it was public. They didn't pass whether to do something or not. It actually failed because budget votes are 2/3. So it doesn't take much to cause that sort of a situation. And then the next week, it's one of the more interesting cases that have happened, and it really shook up the town back when that happened. They basically said, fine, we lost. They took whatever money they could get from the town, and that's what happened with that iteration of the board.
So it sounds to me, and again, disclaimer or full disclosure.
And and I just want to reiterate, if the district had not taken and said, we're going to take the money as is,
Yeah.
what happens at that point is that the state board steps in, because then they feel as though the committee has not fulfilled its local control duties. So they step in and they make a choice on who they actually want to align with in terms of the budget. They could go for a
Right.
number higher than what and make Templeton pay something they don't want to pay,
Right.
or they can make the school committee accept the other amount. But if you get to that point, you have now introduced the Board of Education into your district. They're actually going to send people to watch over mostly everything. Back that, and I don't know if it's changed too much in 2 years, but there was the conversation that our then chairwoman, who is still the chairwoman we have now, had to say to the committee, listen, if we don't do this before the end of December, guess what? We're going to have overseers in here. And is that really what we want?
Right.
Is that fair for all of the local teachers? Is that fair for all of our, to the faith we put in the superintendent? Is that fair? Do we lose that? And so that's what happens. It was very public. It was everywhere.
What I was about to say is
happened.
sort of full disclosure here again, because I don't know when people are coming in and out of this broadcast. Mm-hmm. You're in one particular, you're in Massachusetts, you're in one town, you don't have even a county level board and so forth, but that is not the case everywhere. So the takeaway, I hope, is really familiarize yourself with how your school committee or school board, it'll be called something different based on where you live, how it functions. What are its powers, its real powers? What does it not have the power to do? Don't assume, working backward from those impassioned speeches, right, that these are almighty people who can, with a vote, remove curriculum from the schools or punish teachers or, ban things or whatever. Like that's just, it's my understanding pretty much across the board in the country that that's not really under their purview, that some to a greater or lesser degree have responsibility, like not responsibility, but like authority over big chunks of money and how it's spent. But ultimately, it really comes down, it can in many cases and often does come down to the classroom teacher or teachers, team of teachers, department heads, and principals. That if you are going higher than, it's almost like you have to go at both extremes. You have to go up at like the governorship, right? Because, and the legislature.
And
Only
even
in the
that
sense that
really,
they appoint a couple of people to their state board, but they're also, the legislature has a say. And sometimes the people get to vote some members in. It depends how they're appointed, and every state's a little different.
And every state's a little different. And I'll just tell you about mine. In my state, the governor appoints certain types of people. They have to meet certain qualifications. So you have to have someone from business. You have to have someone from, I don't know, like student representation. You have to have someone from, a couple of different categories. And why are they singing over there? I can hear my family in the background. They're being a little crazy. But
that's okay.
But also, the state recognized PTOs can nominate somebody who goes onto the Board of Education in Massachusetts. The statewide AFL-CIO nominates someone from one of its affiliate groups. And what's the other one? There's the PTOs, and then the student authority. The student authority recognizes somebody. So somebody younger gets on the board too. And they have set term limits, and then once that happens, you actually can't ever run again.
Right.
But in my state, they're all appointed except for those like couple of slots, and then the legislature has nothing to do with it.
Right. So it is, and I think maybe after this broadcast, I'll go and post to my community a link to a website where you can look at a chart that shows visually how your state gets its state board of education, how the members are selected, who picks them. And it's really an important piece of your own civics education if you're a concerned parent using the public schools, because if you're under the impression, like I've said from the beginning, that your school board is going to like hear you and do all the things you want to, or do anything that you want to do, it's just not the place to go. And the power is
Yeah.
so it's weird. It's such a big organization, government schooling, right? And yet it's decentralized, almost like cells of a certain thing, if you get my drift. Like, no one group or one person has all the power to do the things you want them to do. And so it's almost impossible to get complete reform. There's going to be push, pull, push, pull, push, pull. So the status quo has the edge by default. Like, whatever has gotten to be is really hard to change. And it's kind of less sinister than just a side effect of massive bureaucracy that has built in its own kind of protections of, like, these people have to agree with these people have to agree with these people have to agree. And guess what? Their terms are all staggered, so you can never completely replace them. And whatever has gotten in there is really hard to get out. Am I assessing that correctly?
You're assessing that correctly, except, of course, things that, you do have a lot more control over, like the city council. Like the city council over in the next city over, they all get out at the same exact time. You can replace all of them at the exact same time, which is the scary part about the city of Gardner. But you have the ability to replace everyone, including your mayor, in one single election every 2 years.
But they can't change your schools. But they can't change your schools.
Well, technically, in the city of Gardner, the mayor is the chairperson of the school committee, but that's it. That's literally, and they're a voting member.
So, okay, so a voting member and they're a chairperson, so they can affect the agenda of the school committee meetings, and they can affect maybe like buildings and grounds and how money is spent on that. But again, they can't reach into the classroom, grab a teacher by the scruff of the neck, drag them before the school committee, and stop doing bad things. Nobody can do that.
Nobody can.
Right.
Nobody can do that. A court can't even do it like that.
And this is my point. This is my point. So we have a comment, and I don't mean to put DP on the spot. Somebody in the comments, and I won't show it because, again, I don't mean to put this person on the spot, but it's time to take back our school system. I personally have a couple of things to say about that, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. Okay, it isn't. It's not ours. In any meaningful way. It's not ours. We are conscripted to send, our children are conscripted to go there unless we make other arrangements, and we're conscripted to pay for it regardless, whether we have kids in it or not. But just like the house you have 100% mortgage on, we don't own it. We don't own it. We have no say in it. We don't pick the teachers. We can't hire them. We can't fire them. We can't pick the curriculum. It is not in any meaningful way ours. It belongs to the government. That is who runs it. So it's like the military. Do you get to say, because you pay for the military, that you own the military? Do you get to say, I get to pick who's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? No, you don't. Nor do you even get to say who's in charge of your local National Guard office. You don't own it. Just because something is paid for with your tax dollars, it is not a product that you've bought. When's the last time you could take your dollars and go elsewhere? If you own something, you get to say, no, thank you. I'm going to go buy something else, or I'm going to sell what I own to somebody else who wants it. This isn't your property just because you paid for it, because you paid for it at the end of a gun. So, and I'm sorry to be so direct, but that's reality. So there's Deb's rant. I'm turning it over to the more calm and rational Justice. Who has the perfect name
I wasn't calm. Yes. So
okay. So now, what do you have to say to it's time to take back our schools?
I'm not going to give an opinion on how I feel about the public school system because I represent.
I know, because you represent. But
again, what I am going to tell you is this: is that we control one person. That one person, they select other people. Sometimes maybe we make certain level decisions if there's other types of special offices that we have, like treasurers or secretaries or whatever. We can select from.
So you pick the superintendent. That's it.
That's really it. And then the superintendent picks their staff. They go down the lists. And then depending on, where and when, it's layers of appointments on appointments that we are just completely detached from. I mean, I don't know every teacher in the district. I mean, and I was educated here for 10 years. I ended up going school choice over to Gardner, but I was educated in my district for 10 years, and I don't know every person. People have come and gone. You're not notified about that.
Right.
So it's,
Now, how long is the superintendent's contract typically?
so in Massachusetts, it's 6 years. That's
Okay.
a state law.
But principals, are they renewed yearly or are they longer?
It depends.
Oh, it depends. Okay.
And if they're yeah. District by district, it's whatever the contracts are.
And those contract links are negotiated with, I would assume, Massachusetts by with unions, right? You guys have collective bargaining, or they're not in the union, are they? They're administration, so they're not in the union.
Nope. So they work directly. Yeah, if they're not in a union, it goes directly to the superintendent. If they are in a union, they elect their own members, and then they go to us through the processes that the state allows. And I'm trying to think. And even then, when that happens, it's like in my district, and we talked about it a lot last night. We have not last night, sheer goodness, 2 nights ago. We are in the unique situation of we have 2 unions. We actually have one for the paraprofessionals and one for the teachers, and it's
okay.
We have to deal with 2 sets of contracts. We have to deal with 2 sets of negotiation systems. It's
because I've heard in some states
not systems teams, but in some states, what have you heard?
I've heard that some principals, it's like they're working annually, that they're working on very short contract terms, such that it inhibits them from doing a lot of reform because the pressure is on to keep their job. It's like, especially let's say you moved your family to take the job and it's only 1 year. I don't know if that's true everywhere, but I've heard that can be the case.
I don't know, because I'm in such a small district that,
okay,
everything's sort of depending on whatever the budget vote is. Anything can really happen. So like we can set a budget, but like I said, 2019, that did have ramifications for how we would configure the district. So it's just with how many building principals we would have, with how many, vice principals, etc. So, and that was done years ago. And this is the situation that now I'm going to be posed with. And actually, we're going to have another, we might have an interesting situation with a special meeting because, or not, I don't know yet. We were presented with options because of something that the state did. So we have to, with the budgeting, so we have to make a decision how we want to navigate that.
Right.
Because of the CARES Act funds. They didn't follow through on something that they said that they were going to, that we had based our budget on. So now we have to think of a way to handle it. And I can't say much more about that. We were presented with the 3 plans that we were going through, but it's going to be, I'm trying to actually read through some of the rules right now so that way I can understand, because I didn't think I'd be doing a budget vote this early. I mean, this is my last meeting was my 4th meeting, Deb. I mean, I'm talking, that's my 4th meeting, my 5th meeting's coming up. And on my 5th and my 6th, I have to decide more stuff on top of all the controversial stuff that we just did on Wednesday. So it's I don't.
But I mean, that's so. Yes, school committees and school boards have a say in these mask policies, masking and basically, because masking is a little bit of it's like dress code, right?
As long as, well, some districts are putting it in their dress codes. Some of them aren't. Some of them are, and it's different. My district, we voted to not have a policy, which now is not going to, we'll find out on Tuesday if it matters or not. So
now, if a principal decides I'm going to require it, can the principal do that? Do they have the power to do that?
On that,
I mean, that's what I'm wondering, is like, because what I've seen, let's say in my home state of North Carolina, here's what I've noticed is they're doing it county by county,
right,
as to whether they're going to have masking in school. as
Mhm.
opposed to school district by school district. Because, and in many, many cases, the school district is the county. So in other words, like Charlotte, we have
Yes.
Charlotte, the county commission, and then we also have the CMS is a district, Charlotte Mecklenburg
Mhm.
School District. So the county decided, yes, everybody's going to be masked in school. Therefore, now, and then there's a list posted that not every county is requiring it. Like I'd say at this point,
Mhm.
it's maybe 2/3 are something like that. I
Mhm.
can't remember at last count. A bunch that were optional are going to mandated. So it's at this point, I think most are mandating. Some are still optional, but they're doing it on a county by county basis. But you guys are doing it on a town or a district basis. Is that what I'm understanding?
District by district. We're called districts, so they can be regional districts like mine that include multiple
Okay.
towns, or they can just be
Right.
cities, or a city can be a district in and of itself.
Right. So it's again, just as I've said from the beginning, like know your state, get to know what your school board or school committee can do and cannot do. Don't automatically assume, because it's highly unlikely to be the case, that they decide curriculum, and certainly not down at the classroom level. And that, you're going to have to look for other ways in, it sounds like, to get curriculum
Mhm.
reform, is what I'm understanding. That's kind of,
And
that's
I don't even. I understand what people are asking, but I don't even know where you do that, because you don't do that, and you don't really do that in the legislature. You don't do that in the school committees. You don't do it in the governor's office. You can't do it at the federal level. So I don't know where one thinks they can change what
right.
book a teacher hands to a student. And I'm not saying this is somebody, again, over 5 months ago, I was running on an anti-CRT campaign.
Right.
But I can't just walk into a building and tell somebody what to do like that. That's not proper
Right.
administrative procedure. Even if I was an administrator, I can't
Right, like, even the
do that.
principal can't do that. The teacher would have recourse even if the principal said that. So, I
Yeah.
think, they'd
So
at least have their day in, hearing of whatever, to whomever it would be to decide. But I think the principal does decide in terms of hiring and firing. But again, if you're unionized, they can't just fire you. They can't just reprimand you because they don't like the book you assigned. So I mean, it does vary from place to place, but to a large degree, parents, I'm getting the impression the schools and the teachers have the power that you, the parents, are giving them by virtue of sending your kids into the building. And what I mean by that is that if your children are there and you and your fellow parents are not there, in other words, showing up there, making your voices heard at the school, at the actual building, to the actual teachers, to the actual principals, and making it clear to them, to their faces, like go to the source of the problem. And be careful how you do that. Obviously, you don't want to attack people and harass people and so forth. But if you get a
yeah, no.
concerned group of parents together and you are concerned about, let's say, the English teaching team is presenting to the students in terms of the reading material, it strikes me asking as a group for a meeting with the principal and that teaching team and whoever represents them, if they have representation, whatever, but asking politely for a meeting with those people to discuss your concerns would be a much more effective way to go to the people who actually have the power to change what's being done in the classroom on a day-to-day basis than going to your school committee or your school board. Am I
Right.
What do you think?
Right. But even if you do that,
Not
what you
saying it's gonna
have to
work. I'm
understand
just
is
saying.
that, yeah, but you can't, like, it's again, I can't walk in there and do that myself. They don't, it doesn't
I
work
said you'd have to
even like
ask. Like,
that.
I
I
mean,
mean,
it would literally
I
have
know,
to
like, I know
be.
you'd have to ask, but it would have to be an unusual circumstance that they would even entertain that notion,
I
that they would need to
and
feel like that.
Thank you, Justice. Thank you, Justice. I'm glad you said it and it wasn't me, because everybody knows I'm biased. But no, he's right,
But I
guys.
just,
I hope you're hearing him. He's saying that You can ask, and you don't ask, you don't get. But even that, even going straight to the source, and I speak from experience as that mom, I was that parent who politely, nicely, respectfully asked for meetings with directors or principals. Can we have a conversation about what's going on in the classroom? And I wanted to get a group of parents together to go with me to share concerns. And first of all, that was like pulling teeth. Today it might be easier. But even then, I got pushback. I got a lot of pushback of, we don't have time. This isn't really appropriate. We've made our decisions. We're not interested in discussing it. This is what we think is best. And effectively, even in a public school setting, if you don't like it, there's the door. So in other words, even I was told in a public school where theoretically my kids are truant unless I can make other arrangements, right? If you don't like what we're doing, that we, the experts, have decided is best for the majority of the children, there is the door. You are free to go.
Well,
And
and
that
this is
is
the
pretty
whole.
intimidating for a lot of parents.
Well, unless you're in like certain states, like New Hampshire is a little bit different on this, but like even if they tell you like, oh, go out the door, they, I don't know how to. They have to approve you walking out the door with your child. I don't know
Well,
how
you
to
can
say that. And
unenroll.
in Massachusetts,
Yeah, every
not in
state that
Massachusetts,
not in Massachusetts,
in
you can't
Massachusetts,
unenroll and say I'm homeschooling. I think you
you
can. If
have
you
to
have, well,
get
you have to have
permission.
a, you don't
You
have to have
have to get
permission. You do
permission
have
from
to,
this.
you have to notify them formally, and you have to have met certain criteria. I think you guys might be one that has, you might have to have a college degree, but I'm not sure. Some states, most states, it's high school diploma minimum.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I think, to my knowledge, it's legal in every state. What hoops you have to jump through to do it, I don't know. But you don't need to get permission. You just have to jump through the correct hoops of notification, and you
Mhm.
personally have to have the right criteria. But I'm talking about in North Carolina, where it's legal with notification.
Right.
If you have a high school diploma and you
Mhm.
notify, and that's what happened to me here when I had challenges and I tried to go. And again, I was talking not even about take the book out. I was questioning how the book was being presented, like language being used and things like that. And I was told, if you don't like it, too bad, so sad. So, even when it would have been sort of easy to correct some misinformation or say, hey, kids, let me expound on this a little further to you, seventh graders, whatever. Nope. It's like, this how I'm presenting it. Too bad. I don't care if you don't like it. And
Mhm.
so imagine when you say, I don't want you teaching this book at all, or I don't want you teaching this curriculum, the BLM in the classroom or
But that
whatever.
but it's also against but it's also against the Constitution to just ban things like that. That's the other problem with this. You cannot ban speech that you don't like. That's not
No,
how
but
this
you
works.
can't ban speech, but teachers don't have unlimited free speech in the
Right.
classroom. That is a misunderstanding. And people, when teachers say, "Well, I can say what
Right.
I want," it's like, actually, no, you can't. So that is one area where parents can
Right.
push back, and on that, if they're saying things that are objectively inappropriate, cussing at the students, bullying the students, like what happened out in
Oh
Utah
yeah,
when
that
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 teacher got fired.
yeah.
Okay, but
Like
you
that.
have to. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. I was just gonna say like that would be like a standard school board or school committee policy. Like you can't just like run around swearing at students. Like that's nobody thinks that's a good idea, and nobody thinks that's okay, and that's not. That is when we can get involved, but not. But actually, we don't even get involved at that. We don't. We never
Right.
really even
So
get
you
notified of that. So it's
No, I would think not. I've heard even in situations that in my district in Charlotte, they're not always even notified if there's been a major disciplinary issue in a school, like someone brought a gun to school. The parents are supposed to be notified of these kinds of incidents,
right.
and everybody up the food chain is supposed to be notified if it's something severe like that, like if they had a lockdown. And for a while, it wasn't happening. They weren't, they'd have parents would be hearing from their kids that, oh, we were locked down today. Well, I'm sorry, what? Because they were supposed, but they did get better and they did start sending out text messages and things, but there had to be parent pushback. So my point, I guess, is that going to the source with your concerns, provided you're well organized, you are polite, you are, you know, clear in what you're asking for and that what you're asking for is in their purview, right? That strikes me as you have a better chance than going to the school board. So that is, I guess, part of why I asked you to come and talk to people today, is to let them know that they may have a lot of wonderful things to say, but they might be saying them to the wrong ears. Not because
Well,
you
and
guys
that
aren't interested, it's
right,
just there's not much you can do.
and it's school committee policy anyway. Most school committees, the first policy is, well, if you have an issue, go to the source first, and then maybe we'll see you, or maybe we won't. It's
Right.
not up to us to just take every single
Right.
thing that happens and roll with it. Again, we're not quasi judicial. We have certain abilities, but we can't just open up
Right.
investigations all over the place.
And I think you can, and I've heard this, that as parents, you try first with the school and the teacher, if it's a specific teacher. And if that isn't working and you're not getting your needs met or your voice heard, then I've heard you can like escalate it to the school board, but expect it to be more of an informational conversation. Like, this is going on. We're not happy with the situation. Again, it's always better to go with multiple people. Like, you go alone and it's like, what? I mean, the more
Mhm.
people have an issue, the more, right, that it's going to be perceived as something you need to deal with. And then their next step would be to escalate to the board, right? To the state board.
Yeah, it
If
depends
it's
on what
getting
yeah, it depends on what the policies of your state are, but typically, yeah, just refer to the policies of whatever your district or whatever your
right.
county board does, and then you just keep going. But but people can't, within after the local level, it's
I know that I
people,
looked up,
they can just stop you at some point, and then you can't
well,
get any further. I mean,
and also because I wanted to know, even in my own state, I was thinking, I wonder what the grievance process is, right? Just out of curiosity. So I tried and tried and tried and tried and searched and, dug into everything. And the only place I found a grievance process was if you have a grievance related to IDEA, if you have a specific grievance related to special needs. That's it. And or you have a case for civil rights violation, and they were very specific, related to race or sexual orientation, things like that. But not just because, like, I have a grievance about the curriculum or I have a grievance about this. There was just no generic grievance process flow to follow. And that's something I think every parent right now should go search on your state. Grievance process for my school district, whatever it is. See if you can find what it is. Who do you contact first, second, third, et cetera, and what are the standard processes? Because we've learned from Nicole, right, in Rhode Island, that she had to
mhm,
do Freedom of Information Act requests, and now she's getting sued
yeah.
for her trouble, just for asking lots and lots of questions that are relevant about her child's learning. And so this is something that you need to know, like, what's the process. And what we also learned from her is a lot goes on through email between staff members, so that if you're not privy to those emails and it's happening with in the school system, a lot's getting discussed there that you might never know about. So I think you just have to start kind of at the bottom instead of going straight to the school board. The school board's the place you go with and says, that's what I was trying to cross to
Mhm.
people. Anything else you want parents to know, concerned citizens to know, that would help you in your job or might help them in their role as concerned parents, concerned taxpayers?
Just know that your school committee members are very isolated. Like I said, like, even, you had mentioned email. We can't, email each other to the extent that staff members can. Like, there's rules about that. And so, typically the the wisdom is just don't talk to anybody. So we try and exist in our own little corners. It's very isolated. And if you're not careful, it can be very much like a vacuum. You live in a vacuum, and you live in a very much of an echo chamber. And so, you can go to these meetings and you can hear these parents, but
Yeah.
at the end, but you might not hear them. You might just be listening, but you're not really hearing what's going on, because, or or rather listening rather than hearing, however you want to put it. It's because, again, we don't talk to each other. Again, I didn't know or think at any point where we were going to tie on Wednesday night and drag out the conversation about, mandating masks or not, until basically it goes as simple as all in favor, all opposed. And we did it, and we all looked at each other like, what's next?
Like you had no idea how anyone else is going to vote. And you're just like, okay, then. So, all right. Well, Justice, this is so valuable. And I really appreciate you coming to talk to my audience because, well, they need to know. This is how we see it every day, right? There are YouTube, like videos every single day now of like school board meeting goes this and a person goes viral and this guy had great things to say. And it's like I said, it could be, depending on which side of those arguments you're on, it could be gratifying or frustrating, but it doesn't seem to go anywhere. It doesn't really do anything.
Unless it's the topic of the meeting. I mean, that's really only when
right.
you
If your school board has power over that particular issue, and again, please go look at your state or your county or wherever your school committee or school board is, and look up the powers they actually have and familiarize yourself with them. Familiarize yourself with your state's sunshine laws. Those are the laws that tell you like what you have a right to see and hear and read and so forth. They exist in every state, but they vary ever so slightly in their particulars. So it's the devil's in the details. Make sure you know them. And get your information straight from that source. Don't even trust me, because I could be saying a bunch of things that are wrong about your state, because we're talking about Massachusetts here. And we're talking even about Templeton, right? So, even in Western Mass might be a little bit different.
Even then, I'm talking at a high level. I'm not even talking about how my district fully operates, because it's not something I can really go into. So I can't even get into my opinions on, do I like how this works?
Right. So if this is your first foray into being really involved in your kids' schools and how they work, and you're frustrated and there's things you want them to do differently and there's reforms that you want, stop, go research
Take a breath.
And figure out, first of all, you really have to do that. I mean, you do have to teach yourself some civics about your local area. It doesn't work the same across your state. Never mind in all 50 states. It's a little different in every single one. And until you really know what the people you're talking to can do for you, you could very well be wasting your evening or your day or your week or whatever. And if you launch a campaign, I'm going to run and I'm going to replace one of those people before you are fully, aware of how it works, you might be very frustrated and upset. And then have a bunch of people upset with you, because if you're elected on a platform and people are like, yeah, we love this platform, she's going to represent us and this and that and the other. And then you get in there and you find out, like, I can't really deliver. I personally can't deliver on this. I'm not a politician like a regular politician. And even regular politicians can't always deliver what they promise. And that's why listening to these promises is kind of, but it just be sure you know what you're signing up for, and that is what you want to do. Because it might be a very different thing than you expect. And you might have to organize at a much lower level to talk to people at a much lower level. And even there are protocols and procedures and so forth. So that's kind of my, who people are accountable to. It's really not you, the parent. And that's the other thing I want to make clear to people is find out who you're mad at and who they're accountable to. And then who is that person accountable to? And follow it up the food chain. Make sure you understand that food chain before you exert any effort. And then when you get done with that exercise, this is me talking. Justice is just sitting listening to Deb rant now. This is not Justice talking. When you're done with that exercise of figuring out the org chart and who reports to and who's really accountable to whom, and you notice you're not in there, then ask yourself if the effort and time and money required to follow that process and talk to all those people is more or less than the strategy that I've been advocating on my channel. So it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of effort. It can't even amount to a fair amount of money. Suing people is not easy. And launching a lawsuit when you don't have evidence that your rights have been violated against the government is an ordeal. When you have a case like Gabrielle's case is the best I've seen. I mean, even the judge said likely to prevail, right? And look where we're sitting. You know, it's money. It comes down to you've got to have money. And so if you haven't donated yet to Gabrielle Clark's case, by the way, please go to No Left Turns USA and make a donation because it is a fantastic case. She has got so much evidence. And you really need, if you care about this issue, that's your first order of business after this show. I don't care if $5, $2, whatever, $10, any amount. There's no amount too small because this is an undertaking, and support the cases that can win. Where maybe it could set precedent as far as civil rights violations in the classroom. Remember, this is what we're talking about. But it's not easy. I've seen a lot of people saying, don't advise people not to sue. That's what they should be doing. Because the other day on Benjamin Boyce's show, she's giving terrible advice. She's telling people not to sue the government. And I'm like, yeah, because telling them to do it strikes me as crazy advice. I mean, it's like, I don't know. It seems like a giant undertaking to go after people when you don't have like a rock solid case and a boatload of money. But that's just me. And why would you do that when you could just find another solution? If you have that much money at your disposal, maybe start a school. I'm just saying.
Well, even that gets regulated. But even that gets regulated, Deb.
Oh, a teeny one, a micro school, fewer than 120 people. Just, or even just start a co-op. I mean, if you've got $500,000, which is basically what it takes to sue the government anymore at a minimum, then, I think you have enough funds to like educate your own kids some other way. But I mean, that's just me. Call me crazy. But most people don't have it and they have to get it from other sources. And it's really, 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 really hard. And I don't like it when people who have not gone through the little process I've just described of research start suggesting to people to sue. Litigation is not always your best solution. In fact, it rarely is. First, start with words and go to the people, find the right people to talk to. And if you can't find success there, then you make a decision at each stage. Is it worth it to continue? Is it worth it to continue? Is it worth it to continue? But please bear in mind that people like Justice are unpaid and are not a quasi-judicial office. They are public servants, but they really don't serve like you individually per se. They serve the district, it seems like. I mean, right? Kind of.
Yeah, no. My oath of office is to the district. So yeah, it's not even to the towns of Templeton and Phillipston. So I don't serve the towns.
Right. So just be advised of that, what they do, what they don't do, and so forth. So I don't want to take up any more of your precious, precious time. I so appreciate that because I know you got to go read up on all those rules and so on.
Yeah.
So, right. Yeah. But I can't thank you enough. It's really, really important. This is all part of it. I can sit here and educate people about curriculum, about this, about that, but then it comes down to like, if reform is what you're after, understand what the nature of the beast is. Like, what is the shape of this thing that I want to reform? How does it actually work? Because until you know that, we say it all the time that we don't want our kids taught about being activists. They shouldn't say, we as the adults are complaining. I'm sorry, I froze, I think. We as the adults are complaining that our kids are being told to tear things down and change things they don't understand, like capitalism. As an example, right? Like, capitalism bad, it failed. And they're like, you don't even know what it is. You don't know how it works. Well, maybe the same could be said for the government-run schools. Like, before you seek to reform it, and that's not me saying it's good. That's just me saying it is, wherever you live. But in order to try to change something, you need to first understand what it is, what it really is, not what you imagine it is, what it really is, how it really works, who's really accountable to whom, and what you, the taxpayer, you, the parent, really have a say in and don't, and then decide what you're going to do next. but simply yelling and screaming and this is not me criticizing, but I just don't want to see people waste their time. I don't want to see people get upset and disappointed and frustrated and then have their kids potentially face backlash. Because remember, when you go up and you talk into a
Oh,
microphone
yes.
with your face on video, and then it's on YouTube, and then it's on the television or on the nightly news that one parent gave this speech and said this about the teachers or whatever, and your kid is going into the classroom, please remember that I know you all care deeply about your kids. That's why you're there. But backlash is real from kids as well as teachers and administrators to you, to your
Well,
kid, to everybody. Please remember.
and I just want to point out that, yeah, no, that is a big thing. I mean, we had a serious vote on Wednesday. It actually is the highest viewed video that we have on our district's YouTube channel right now. It has almost 600 views over 2 days. And we're a very small community, so that's pretty significant. And again, yeah, fear. I mean, even for us, because we walk into these situations and because we only see what's on the agenda and the items that are provided for us, we can become surprised as committee members about what could happen and what could come forward. And remember, some committee members are parents.
Right.
When I sit on there, I don't have kids. I'm young. I come from more of that fresher perspective of I just came out of college, and I understand how college is its own interesting world, as I discussed at the beginning, how again, with all the shady stuff that goes on in student government. But what people have to understand is that you have to ask very human questions, because they're humans, that about how you think that they're going to feel when they're sitting on those committee situations. After our committee vote, after we went through everything, we did, we had a recess, and the cameras were still rolling, but we turned the mics off, and the people were still allowed to hear us in the room and stuff. And we sort of talked amongst, some of us, said one thing to another, and we were like, "Are we okay?" And we're all okay after how the vote went down, because it's very serious and it's very stressful, and we don't need to fear retribution from one another. At least it's one of the good things that happened for me on Wednesday, is that we all knew it was difficult. We all knew that it was going to come to some sort of conclusion. We just didn't know in what format. And even if we don't like how the other person voted, we at least have enough compassion to realize, hey, we're going to get angry emails either way about this. Everybody hates somebody. I would rather people scream at me in the street than at a school committee meeting, because they can't scream obscenities at me at a school committee meeting. I'm okay if you scream them at me if I'm out on the side of the road, because it's like, okay, whatever. It doesn't bother me. I have thick enough skin for that. But just remember that, we are all human beings. Members on the school committees, they can, and maybe they do, worry about their own, personal lives, or, because their children go to the schools too, and people have unlimited access to those kids.
Right.
And like I said, I can't just go in and swipe a key card and go through. And if I'm a parent, then other parents fear you as a school committee member, and the teachers fear you. That's something that I learned, is that, I had known people. I went to my first, committee event when I went to graduation, and I knew some teachers, and they acted a lot differently towards me since I had gotten elected. And I was like, I kind of just wish that you talked to me normal, because
Well,
I
you don't
can't
even have any
do
power over them. You can't do anything to them. What are they afraid of?
I don't know. It's like I don't know how to even describe it. It's just the niceties, the pleasantries, and you can see it. I mean, I can see through situations very clearly, and I know some of these people personally, and it's like, why fear us? We can't go in a direction that's going to hurt you like that. At some point the state steps in if we were to go completely rogue, but
Right.
nobody but we have no interest in this.
Right.
We
Now,
aren't paid.
I have seen some videos of school board members who sort of pontificated from the,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
and they've expressed opinions about parents. I mean, there was one I saw the other day where a bunch of people literally accused all the parents who had been complaining about various things, or not complaining, sorry, asking a bunch of questions. Not only did they not answer any of the questions, really, but they pretty much called all the parents racist. And I mean,
that's just inappropriate. Like,
of course
I'm
it's
sorry, but
inappropriate.
if you have those opinions, keep them to yourself, please. Like, if you can't say it at a public meeting, please just stay off of Facebook. Like, I
Right.
don't
No,
know who
this
needs
was
to hear
literally
that.
in public. This was at
I
the
know, I
meeting.
know.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
this was at the meeting.
This
Oh, it
was at
was
the
at the meeting. Some
meeting.
of them I know are happening in Facebook groups. I know that on some
Right.
of the incidents that are going online, and I'm
No,
like,
but
that is completely ridiculous.
this was in New Hampshire. I think Carlin posted it. This was in New Hampshire. I think it was Exeter.
Oh, I know that.
Okay.
Yeah, I
And
know
this
that
is,
district. Yeah,
where parents were firing, they were just rapid fire questions,
yeah.
and there weren't answers. There was one answer that I thought was wildly inappropriate where a gentleman said, "Well, I'm black, so of course I'm Black Lives Matter," which I'm like, I'm sorry, what? That doesn't follow. That doesn't work. I'm for Black Lives Matter because I'm black. And I'm like, it's an organization. That doesn't make any sense. But okay. And then the other question was something, there were a whole bunch of questions. And then there was a guy, I don't know if he was the chairman or what he was. But at the end, he said, well, these questions certainly do show why we need this curriculum or something, or why we need this training. It was like diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And it was like, well, this just shows why we need it. Might as well have just said, all y'all are racist. And then he got applauded by the audience present. And the whole thing was wildly inappropriate. So again, I tell my audience, if you witness things like that, this is what we're devolving to, because that panel of people probably didn't really even have the power to decide, except if they themselves were getting the training. Like they could go and pay for the training for themselves. And they could even possibly, depending on how their school budget and district works, they could possibly have a say in how it's being done in the district level for district employees, let's say, or something like that. But in the classroom, that's likely not their purview. And
I had watched the same thing too, and I'll be honest about that. I didn't understand why they were having that meeting. I've sat on 4 meetings now, and I'll tell you, we don't have time for presentations like that. We have to deal with budgets. We have to deal with, whatever's going to happen in executive session.
It's almost like in some states, both sides are starting to play to the cameras, is the impression I get. That you've got like kind of people who are getting, here's an interesting question. I can't answer it, but maybe you can. And this gentleman says, silly question. Why is the public meeting proctored by the school board members? Shouldn't it be controlled by the public and the school members compelled to answer questions?
So that
but they don't work. You guys don't work for the public. You don't work for the public.
Yeah,
you work for the district.
We work for the district. Our oath is to the district. And we have to do business. That's the point of why we convene. It's not for it's not a informational session of the city council and right after is going to be a vote on it. We have agenda items. We have to do them. We said we needed to meet for our scheduling purposes, and we execute those. I understand that people believe that there's all of this, this local sort of control. And I think when they see a town meeting and they don't understand that a town meeting is extremely different from individual committee meetings. But even at a town meeting, your moderator controls everything. Granted, they're elected by the people and sometimes they're elected on the spot at that meeting, but your moderator controls that meeting. And your moderator cannot compel speech from people. You can't, force me up against, any wall and just say, answer these questions. It's like, no, you can't. I can't do that to you. I can't make you come to the meeting and proctor my meeting. And I can't expect you to come to my meeting and make it. It doesn't work like that. This is the United States.
Well, and you guys aren't levying taxes. You guys are not levying any taxes. So it's not taxation without representation. You're not doing, you're
not the tax rate.
You're not compelling the public to do anything.
What we what we do can affect what the tax rate is, but again, it depends on whatever your city council says yes to or what your town meeting says yes to.
Yeah, pay more attention to who you elect for city council. Pay more attention to who you elect for mayor. Pay more attention to. I mean, I think people believe that school boards and school committees control schools. I think there's a gigantic misunderstanding about how these groups work and what is in their purview and what is not. And while I cannot speak for every state and every district, I am reasonably certain that they do not control what goes on in your child's classroom.
Boards of trustees are more powerful. I mean, right. Boards of trustees, at least you got money and skin in the game. Like we don't. I don't. Right. I laugh at this because it's not under my purview.
Right. And again, people watching, please don't hear us laughing like or criticizing you. Right. You haven't. No one's explained this in your civics class.
Nobody told you exactly what's going on. No one's told you exactly. And they don't open up a meeting.
The other thing that is really interesting
and explain the rules.
Right. The thing that is interesting is that when you first started, when you first came on, you said like, I can't talk about this and I can't talk about that because there are rules about what you're allowed to talk about to the public. So it's also not the kind of thing that the school committee or school board member can go outside the meeting and say, and start like telling the public a bunch of stuff. Like it's on you, the public, non-member of the school committee or school board, to learn what they do. These people that you elected to go and do that. That is actually your civic responsibility to understand what they do and don't do if you want to be involved. Now, I'm not saying you have to go learn this. That's your choice. But if you're saying, I want school reform, or I want my kids to be able to use these schools because I'm compelled to pay for them or whatever, then yes, I'm sorry to say the responsibility is on you to teach yourself what they do and don't do any way you can. The information is all publicly available. You can go read up on it. And then once you learn that, draw yourself a chart. Who answers to whom about what? And if I have a complaint about the what, where do I go first? Don't just go to the thing that everybody says you go to, because that's often wrong. Like, how many people do you know are like, the president should do this and the president should do that? And you're like, yeah, that federal government doesn't have that power. Like that's the most extreme example, but I'm seeing it every single day. We'll just turn the school board. We'll take over the school board. And like staggered terms of 3 years. And there are how many members? There's like 9, 12. I mean, like depending on where you are, there's different numbers of members. One of them is the mayor. Another one's the superintendent. Have fun. Good. Okay. And meanwhile, your kid has graduated. All the years that staggered went by and you got all different members now, but your child has just graduated high school. How much did that work for your child? It didn't do anything. Meantime, you're on their radar. They're like, oh, here they come again. Here they come. Oh my God. Right. And everybody in the district knows who those people are, even if they agree with you. Even if they agree with you. I've had people contact me privately and be like, I agree with you. Or when I was serving and I agreed with you. I couldn't do anything about it. Right. So that's why I asked you to come on. I know I said goodbye, like what, half an hour ago already. So I really am going to
25 minutes.
25. I'm sorry. I do this to everybody, but I'm glad that question came in because that was helpful. But thank you so much, Justice. How can people find you? I know you have a YouTube channel explaining how government works in other respects. And that is Justice Graves, right? It's just your name.
Yeah. It's just Justice Graves. Yeah. You can
you can look him up.
I think it's in the description.
Right. And I encourage you actually to go subscribe to his channel because Justice does a great job of teaching us civics when it comes to things, for example, like some of the federal policy around education. So please avail yourself of his YouTube because he does a great job breaking it down, especially Civics Secures Democracy Act, and also even just what the difference is between a rule and a law and blah, blah, blah. So,
or Votorama.
So when your lawmakers going, we just banned blah, 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 we just banned CRT at the federal level. And people are like, newsflash, we did this. And both Justice and I are sitting there going, oh my God. Because they're lying to you. That's just not how it works.
It's all guys. It's all for the cameras. It's all for the
theater.
Cameras.
please, your schools did a not so good job of teaching civics. They're about to do a worse job for your kids. So avail yourself of this information. Thank you, Justice Graves. And thank you to everybody for listening. Please share this with those friends of yours who are going to school board meetings. Make sure they know. All right. That's it. Have a great afternoon, everybody.